broadcasting is precisely a common resource and a common knowledge that excludes none. The remark displayed here is taken from Paddy Scannell's 1989 piece entitled Public Service Broadcasting and Modern Public Life, and summarises Scannell's compelling defence of public service broadcasting as a democratic, equalising and unifying force for the public good. Though penned over 2 decades ago, Scannell's sentiments continue to reflect the enduring goals of the UK's public service broadcasters to inform, educate and entertain the nation with diverse yet collectively relevant programming and content. However, replace the word broadcasting with Facebook, YouTube or Twitter, and this remark also echoes the communitarian claims promoted by these popular social networks. That is, that social media offer universally accessible, egalitarian and publicly available tools which allow globally dispersed individuals, provided they're web literate of course, to unite and not only consume but also produce shared cultural resources. For example, Facebook's mission to make the world more open and connected promises to go a step further than the BBC's comparatively short-sighted remit of national cohesion and instead unite the entire world, while YouTube facilitates the production and consumption of user-generated videos, providing online audiences with what they call a forum for people to connect, inform and inspire across the globe. Despite the commercial imperatives of these profitable platforms, these sentiments suggest that social media democratises many of public service broadcasting's core ideals, and unlike the top-down approach traditionally implemented by mass communication, social network users are apparently informing, educating and entertaining themselves. As academics such as Sonia Livingstone, Jeze van Dijk, Dan Harris and James Bennett have noted, the move from analogue to digital spectatorship has brought with it a demand for new terms that reflect the shifting and multifaceted status of the audience. Identified as consumers and producers, individuals and collectives, passive spectators and active users, the new digital audience is constituted by prosumers, viewsers, producers and co-creators. Flexible subject positions that incorporate a number of sometimes contradictory roles. From this plethora of choices, I'm taking up the term viewser since it best reflects the active role that individuals play as both spectators of programming and active users of interactive interfaces. As I will further explore, contemporary social media platforms are apparently empowering the user with a voice mobilised through active interaction with media texts and a choice, providing a plurality of content and tools that allow users to set their own terms of spectatorship, consumption and production. This paper interrogates the utilisation of social media by public service broadcasting and will question whether these profitable social networks are actually delivering the democratic ideals of inclusiveness, empowerment and commonality that they advocate. Public service broadcasters have by definition long fought for the establishment and maintenance of an informed and inclusive public. The question is, are these social media platforms really doing the same? Should public service broadcasters be doing more not to just embrace the benefits of social media, but to recognise and perhaps challenge the theoretical implications that social media sites embody in their current forms? Building on the work of Cass Sunstein and Eli Pariser, as well as incorporating observations from the developing field of software studies, I will be interrogating the role that personalisation processes play in social media. That is processes that facilitate the systematic filtering and refinement of information flows by social networks in order to deliver content to individuals that is customised to suit their pre-existing needs and desires. In doing so, I will seek to treat systematic personalisation on social media as a notion comparable to ideas of narrowcasting that public service broadcasters have in the past challenged. So that's just a couple of mission statements there. Early theorisations of the internet, such as those posited by Howard Rheingold and James Duran, hailed the net's many-to-many model of communication as communitarian and democratic, facilitating a new public sphere in which individuals could contribute equally and actively to informed public debate. Though these claims have since been met with scepticism, the potential for social media to create multi-directional dialogue between producers and consumers has certainly persisted. Liking, sharing, posting, and retweeting are now common forms of web interaction and have opened new channels of engagement between public service broadcasters and their public. Understandably then, public service broadcasters have sought to embrace social networking in order to effectively engage with their users. In the UK, the BBC and to a lesser extent Channel 4, as a public service broadcaster, have provided Facebook-based forums, such as BBC News on Facebook. There's hundreds of forums for all sorts of different programmes on Facebook, and have successfully joined the Twitter sphere, incorporating user tweets into a plethora of entertainment programmes and even flagship news broadcasts. However, it is not just social media's capacity to facilitate audience participation that apparently empowers the individual user. Social media also bring with them the pleasures of personalised media. Whereas public service broadcasters have long sought to collectively inform a unified public through the transmission of national events and common interests, the popular social networks that I have so far cited are largely designed to inform, educate and entertain the individual. Designed to tailor content to suit an individual's culture-specific needs, wants and tastes, personalisation processes implemented by sites such as Facebook and YouTube seek to deliver relevant material to individuals by computationally determining their pre-existing desires and preferences. I'm going to give a bit of an example in a second. Just to elaborate further then, online personalisation can be described as an algorithmic and automated process that attempts to deliver individually relevant information to end users. Personalisation processes use a number of signals such as web history, cookies, IP addresses, and a host of other signals to track and profile the consumption patterns of individuals in order to recommend or prioritise certain pieces of content or services over others. And these can be in the form of data sets, media texts, brand connections, and commodities. According to the platforms that use this process, personalisation functions to filter out unwanted content and deliver the platforms and deliver the most applicable information to a user. In order to deliver relevance, personalisation processes attempt to determine a user's explicit or implicit preferences by demarcating them into sometimes complex demographics that try to identify applicable components of users' existing cultural, social and economic circumstances. For example, YouTube and Facebook, and to a lesser extent Twitter, use personalisation to deliver targeted content specific to users' tastes and interests, and this can be in the form of targeted advertising, customised search engine results or search results, recommended media texts such as videos on YouTube, and of course news feeds. So Facebook newsfeed is inherently personal. The Facebook newsfeed is a particularly noteworthy example. So for those of you that are not familiar with newsfeed, it looks like this. It's the information stream that a Facebook user gets when they log on to online, and it has their friends' updates as well as pages they've liked and brands. So Facebook is a particularly noteworthy example due to Facebook's discursive construction of newsfeed as news. Displayed here, the newsfeed can be described as a content stream that Facebook aggregates for users from friends and the pages and brands that they have liked. In the context of this personalised newsfeed, the term news differs dramatically to what we might expect as authoritative news disseminated by the world's public service broadcasters. However, Facebook sees no distinction between news of a friend's engagement and news of Europe's financial crisis. Founder Mark Zuckerberg famously once stated, "A squirrel dying in front of your house may be more relevant to your interest right now than people dying in Africa." In this context, personal relevance is key to newsworthiness, not collective concern or public interest. Thus, despite the claims to commonality and connectivity embodied in their mission statement, Facebook's appeal lies largely in their ability to deliver highly customised material to their audience. The personalisation of media content, however, is neither a new trend or one specific to social media. As James Bennett notes, the rollout of digital media has brought with it the greater opportunities of pluralism, wherein the proliferation of channels and platforms created by digital media are able to meet the wants and needs of a newly identified heterogeneous audience constituted by what Zeller-Jacques calls DIY citizens. This is a form of citizenship that consists of putting together an identity from the available choices, patterns and opportunities on offer to individuals. Bennett notes, however, that this approach aligns citizenship and identity in terms that put personal choice at the heart of its conception, meaning that, to quote, the promise of choice is strongly encoded in the interface structure of the BBC's ITV applications, often existing in dialect or tension with traditional public service broadcasting values, such as the creation of an informed and educated citizenry. Despite the dialectical tensions between universalism and pluralism highlighted here, the UK's public service providers through 4OD and BBC iPlayer have championed the benefits of on-demand viewing that allows users to watch what they want when they want. Furthermore, components of these platforms, such as the iPlayer's For You section, seek to assist the user in finding what they want when they want, by recommending content based on their previous consumption habits. Yet, as aforementioned, the way in which personalisation software determines what is relevant to a user aligns a user's wants and tastes of the present entirely with their wants and needs of the past. For example, based on my previous penchant for The Voice, the BBC iPlayer recommended me 5 more episodes of The Voice last week when I logged onto my iPlayer. Though, of course, the For You section of the iPlayer is only one component of their many services, this component operates on the notion that the personal equates to the similar, a notion that many social media networks also encompass through their embrace of systematic personalisation processes. As Eli Pariser recognises, there is an alarming consequence to this notion of personal relevance. There is an implicit reduction of diversity, common interest and public experience embedded in these personalisation processes that result in a direct reaffirmation of an individual's pre-existing socio-economic identity, serving only to reinforce and not challenge their already established cultural perceptions. As Pariser summarises, personalisation can lead you down a road to a kind of informational determinism in what you've clicked on before determines what you see next, a web history you're doomed to repeat. You can get stuck in a static, ever-narrowing version of yourself, an endless U-loop. Taken to its theoretical extreme, this mediated reflection of your own desires would lead to a catastrophically narrow worldview, a view that through this process of endless narrowing could potentially restrict your capacity to engage in informed public debate. Cass Sunstein's work on echo chambers reflects a similar sentiment. In his book Republic 2.0, Sunstein argues that the move towards highly personalised media consumption and away from universal content sources reduces the capacity of individuals to effectively engage in deliberative democracy, with individualised online content streams such as Facebook's newsfeed creating divisive echo chambers in which a web user is always only confronted with their own points of view and own pre-existing preferences. Despite these criticisms, and perhaps understandably in the name of non-paternalistic pluralism, the UK's public service broadcasters have embraced individualised forms of online consumption. However, the U-loop that Pariser highlights reflects a similar concern voiced by a host of scholars in regards to commercial broadcasting, that is, narrowcasting, or generic programming that offers convenience television based on individual choice and consumer sovereignty. In many ways, then, personalisation is nothing new. The Peacock Committee of 1985, which recommended the privatisation of the BBC, championed the same principles of personal relevance and consumer choice that some social media champion today. Yet the Peacock Committee, despite favouring commercial broadcasting, was forced to acknowledge the value of public service broadcasters for delivering difficult, controversial and complex programming that would otherwise be left unbroadcast by profit-driven enterprises intent on broadcasting tried and tested programming. As Scannell recognises, the commercial sector's reliance on the familiar was accompanied by an unwillingness to try challenging, demanding and still more uncomfortable subject matter. It does not take much to see a similar reliance of sameness coded into the commercial success of Facebook and even Twitter. Both commercial broadcasting and commercial social media networks seek to perpetuate familiar content in the in the quest to sustain commercially viable media platforms. There is, however, one striking and somewhat worrying difference between narrowcasting and the personalisation practices that I have described. That is that in many instances, personalisation processes used by social media use algorithms to determine what the user wants on behalf of the user in order to personalise content, thus rendering the idea of consumer choice as somewhat redundant. It is not the consumer themselves that chooses their content, but the platform working to personalise information and services in the user's stead. It is important to stress that the relationship between personalisation and universalisation is not an either-or scenario. Of course, social media is not inherently wrong or detrimental to notions of an informed public. Used in the right way, social media can mobilise democratic debate and has also empowered users with a voice and with a choice in ways that models of top-down communication have largely failed to accommodate. But as this paper has explored, public service broadcasters have in the past approached ideas of consumer choice and personal relevance with caution. These sentiments must be balanced with ideas of social cohesion and shared cultural resources if individuals are to function as well-rounded and well-connected citizens. Democratic communication doesn't just rely on giving the public tools for self-expression, it relies on the constitution of informed individuals brought together in a common public sphere. There is little point in empowering users with voices if they are only going to speak into echo chambers that serve to reflect back their own similar preferences. Public service broadcasters could be defining a digital niche by embracing not personalisation processes and individualistic consumption habits, but encouraging diversity and inclusivity, perhaps in the form of a social network service committed to public service broadcasting's original goals, enduring goals, I should say. After all, the problems of personalisation are complex and nuanced, yet these are issues that public service broadcasters and academic advocates have faced before. Social media networks might be great for hyper-individualised news such as squirrels dying in front yards, but in the interest of profits, these commercial networks frequently do not show public that, to quote Parissa, is uncomfortable or challenging or important other points of view. Public service broadcasting can meet this challenge by highlighting the reductive and divisive capacities of social media, by continuing to inform the public of the news they didn't know they didn't know.
This work is called Public Service Media, Engaging in Fan-Based Social Network Practices. I've written a paper, and now I'm going to show you some visuals and take you directly to the conclusions. If you want to read the paper, it will be available afterwards. I've studied this campaign.
Our mission was to let all of Sweden know that SVT, the Swedish public service broadcaster, created an iPhone app for SVT Play, their on-demand web service. And since we didn't have much of a media budget, we had to come up with something unique. Something that people would talk about with their friends. Something that journalists and bloggers would write about. We already knew that Swedes love SVT Play, so we wanted to take advantage of that. We also knew that Apple's approval process of an app can take some time. So, instead of doing a traditional campaign aimed at the Swedish people, we created a campaign from the Swedish people, aimed directly at Apple CEO Steve Jobs, requesting he approve the app as quickly as possible. We sent 2 SVT Play fans over to Cupertino to demonstrate every day outside Apple's headquarters. It didn't take long before they became well known on campus, with Apple employees coming out to take their pictures and offering them a cup of warm coffee. Back in Sweden, we could follow their progress via a live link at dearstevejobs.com. On the site, we also had an open letter to Steve Jobs, in which we politely requested that he hurry up the approval process. He could watch a quick demo of the app and press the big Ja button to approve the app directly on the site. Everyone had a chance to help pressure Steve, for example by voting. You could also encourage friends and family to help through various social media apps. And the more people got involved, the more the site spread across the internet. It was even possible to make a video clip to inspire Steve and view videos that others had recorded. The recording device was connected directly to YouTube, and within minutes your video would appear in our channel and on the site. After just a few days, the channel was the most viewed in Sweden. The site rapidly spread across the internet, both in Sweden and abroad. Tons of people wrote Facebook updates, tweeted, and recorded videos. The response and help from the Swedish people exceeded all of our expectations. Some even pretended to be Steve and tried to approve the app themselves.
Okay, I'm gonna say it. Yeah.
Thank you for watching.
From this case, I explore how public service media is engaging in fan-based social network practices. The purpose is to describe and to contribute to a deepened understanding of articulations and renegotiations of the public service media ideal of being in the public interest, taking place in activities based on the involvement of fans. The campaign started December 16th in 2009, and I made a qualitative analysis of the material in social media like blogs, Twitter and Facebook, what was written about the campaign in Swedish daily press, and I've also made an interview with the project manager for the campaign from Swedish television. There are some examples of Twitter searches for Dear Steve Jobs and Dear Steve that shows how this campaign links into and connects to a global community of Apple and Dear Steve. We got 6 new tweets since I logged on. Here's a Twitter search. Here's my my Twitter account. There are a lot of tweets. This is my front door in Lund in Sweden. And here is my ongoing Twitter search for Dear Steve Jobs. We have one from September 13th, where it's a hashtag saying, I know you're there. iPhone 5 has arrived, yet still not hooked. Can I at least get one with a wood panel, please? In 2009, there are a lot of tweets on Dear Steve Jobs linked to this campaign. We have the same with the hashtag Dear Steve Jobs, Dear Steve, which was one of the ascribed hashtags for the campaign. You see the automatic replies that are linked to your Twitter account, where we have the English Dear Steve Jobs, approve the SVT Play app at, and so on. And you have the Swedish Kära Steve Jobs, godkänd SVT Play appen. And we have here Joachim Jardenberg, who is one of the advisors to the Digital Commission for the Swedish government. And a well-known, he calls himself an internaut, and a couple of months ago it was Internet Guru. It will probably keep on going here. When I analyzed the campaign, results showed that the socio-material aspects of social network media include being an arena where interest and admiration, fans, creates a space where democratic values become intertwined with commercial efforts. Now, swooshing into the analytical section of the paper. In the campaign, the fans are made active producers, mainly as part of making viral marketing work. The power of fans as being nomadic, in Jenkins' words, remaking professionally produced material is structured by companies as part of the possibility to create videos on and for the site. Fan activity seems not to impact mainstream media, rather it seems to serve mainstream media. I've used Henry Jenkins' theoretical proposal of pop cosmopolitans. And when it comes to fans as pop cosmopolitans, as being part of a global Apple community, it seems like there is one, and it's a base for getting to know Swedish cultures from afar and being more interested in it. For example, there are a lot of tweets saying, Sweden looks fun, I want to go there. Oh, on this site I can learn how to speak Swedish, and so on and so forth. But what Jenkins ascribed pop cosmopolitans as being their own intelligentsia, it doesn't exist. It's not they are not critics, they are not historians, and they are not translators, and they are not educators. Instead, they are more or less linked to either the Apple community or digital media developers, cutting across boundaries of media, marketing, design, journalism, looking for best examples on and in social network media. Overall, there is an extreme tolerance looking into this Twitter flow, in that there is almost no critique. And in this setting, it is difficult to see who is dominating who, Swedish television or Apple, Swedes or Americans, and so on. The presented material in relation to Jenkins seemed therefore to show an overemphasizing of creative participatory aspects, where the democratic aspects are not easily distinguished. I see that a key issue concerns if fans can be considered as parts of networks in a democratic way. I've also used Beck and his work on cosmopolitan democracy, for example. And in the campaign, it seems like there is an involvement of equalizing voice among plural actors in the function of when voting, an automatic message was sent. Joakim Jardenberg side to side with a software developer at a small company in Malmö, for example. The complexity starts in linking this to dialogue among plural actors in a deliberative way to do better decision making. The configuration of the campaign was to address a clear statement of yes to only one person, the CEO Steve Jobs, not to invite to a dialogue. And in the measurement from the company Forsman and Bodenfors that made this campaign, no indicators for dialogue and decision making is set forth. Initiating a discussion on arguments from both sides, yes and no, are not part of the normative framework. There seems to be a common risk consciousness present linked to the human right of access. The SVT Play app needs to be available on App Store, including iPhone users as SVT Play users. If we kind of link this in to cosmopolitanism of global civil society, the campaign involves alliances of users and companies. Connections exist within communities, between communities, and also in national and local solidarities. One example is identified as connected around media professionals with a professional ethics based in a good campaign. Solidarities go across public service broadcasting as well as Apple. And being Swedish is also part of, made as a center for solidarity. Let's support the Swedes against Apple, for example. It is also clear that but two main points that it is clear that the actual global governance is made by Apple, by approving or not approving the app. It is also clear that democratic aspects are accessibility and implicit public service broadcasting values. Does this mean that the state, taken form as Swedish television, become agents of cosmopolitan public service broadcasting law in protecting the rights of world citizens, focusing on access to media content for public debate through iPhone? Well, both cosmopolitan and community social relations explain the changing configuration of power politics. A deepened understanding of articulations and renegotiations of the public service media ideal of being in the public interest can take place in activities based in the involvement of fans. But complexity exists and several issues remain. Thank you.
Okay.
My main argument today is that the understanding of the impartiality rule, editors and journalists of the news website of the BBC indicate that they still operate with a paternalistic understanding of public service remit, in which the public is understood as primarily those who receive the service of public service broadcasting. As I will argue, this is preferable to the technologically deterministic view which celebrates online participation as evidence of a public debate. Considering earlier research into PSB and the online world, this suggests that the celebratory technologically deterministic view within the industry has been replaced by reverting back to earlier understandings of PSB, which sees the broadcaster as the benign benefactor. And this is my structure. So I'm just going to give you a very quick background, a little bit of methodology, and then focus on the findings. I hope you all know what the BBC's remit is. As you know, it's been redefined again and again since the 1920s, and one of the latest redefinitions was in the run-up to the current Royal Charter, which runs to 2016, in a green paper by the Department of Culture, Media and Sport. And basically that's what it says. The BBC's remit is about sustaining citizenship and civil society, promoting education and learning, stimulating creativity and cultural excellence, representing the UK, its nations, regions and communities, and bringing the UK to the world and the world to the UK. And as you can see, there's quite a lot of similarity to the traditional educate, inform and entertain and bringing the nation together in this current definition. However, there's also a greater emphasis on public service broadcasting as being a corrective to the market, particularly around stimulating creativity and cultural excellence, because the market cannot provide that anymore because it's been so fragmented that the money isn't there to really do that. So, in a way, that's the current background for the BBC's public service remit. On the other hand, we should also remember that the BBC and its news and affairs, current affairs, are really central to the BBC's brand. And you know, the BBC is existing in a very strong market environment and needs to develop a strong brand, as Catherine Johnson has argued, also internationally. And it's the idea of the trustworthiness of BBC as news organisation, something that came up today already, which it sells in particular internationally. And hence there are two things that are really central for the BBC, particularly around news and current affairs, namely it needs to emphasise its impartiality and its political independence, and on the other hand it also really needs to keep editorial control. So for this research project, I used a mixed approach of discourse analysis of information that is available on the BBC, primarily on the inside the BBC website. And trust me, there's so much material available. I'm not finished looking at it yet, despite the fact that I've spent the last 3 weeks looking at it. I did interviews with key personnel. I will be doing more, and I did a textual and discourse analysis of the website, which is also ongoing, simply because I want to have a longer snapshot than a week. To look at the comments. The BBC obviously has this impartiality rule, which is part of the remit, but there's quite significant political pressure on it, particularly around its political reporting. Think of Nick Robinson, who is the key political editor for the BBC. He used to be a member of the Tory party, and as a result he's constantly there's constant rumours that he presents a biased opinion of the BBC, but he's no longer a member of the Conservative Party, if I may just point that out. But within the BBC, impartiality is clearly taken seriously. There are several reviews, some of which are still ongoing, and they are focused around particular reporting, for example, economic reporting, reporting of the Iraq conflict, etc. And there are also BBC Trust seminars series on the topic. So there's clearly an aim to monitor and define what impartiality actually is. The central term in that relation is due impartiality. Thus, impartiality is not fixed, but flexible to reflect on ethical, moral and political issues. So I'm giving you the definition from inside the BBC. The term due means that the impartiality must be adequate and appropriate to the output. taking account of the subject and nature of the content, the likely audience expectation, and any signposting that may influence the expectation. Due impartiality is often more than a simple matter of balance between opposing viewpoints. Equally, it does not require absolute neutrality on every issue or detachment from fundamental democratic principles, and that's from Guidelines Section 4, Impartiality. So the term due is a matter of editorial and journalistic decision making. So each context demands its particular approach. So on the website, for example, you sometimes do get comments from editors that are kind of very opinionated, but as several staffers have pointed out, they're usually there in order to give you the context or in order to give you an indication of the significance of what is happening. And on top of that, it's really clearly marked as a comment by a particular person, so it's separate from the rest of the text. Okay, from the interviews, I've got this in relation to impartiality. One of the BBC producer and broadcast journalists said, as well as being a fundamental part of our work as journalists, the BBC has an even greater obligation to be balanced as we receive public money to help keep us impartial. We have no corporate sponsors to appease, and we must fairly represent a range of views on political and contentious subjects because we are paid for by the people who hold a range of views. We must serve and represent this diversity. So the thing that strikes me here are two things. On the one hand, the word balance, which is mentioned again and again also in other material, but actually here it is used relatively unproblematically. But in other material, you find that the word balance is actually always contextualized, as in the quote I mentioned earlier. It's not just about balance of viewpoint by presenting different viewpoints, but actually thinking about what this balance might be, what is the particular context, etc. So impartiality is not quite balance. The other thing that strikes me about this one is the word fairly. This producer in particular was really preoccupied with representation and notions of justice, doing justice to the situation, doing justice particularly towards the people the person was representing. So, there's a clear sense of being engaged with the people they are representing, but also the people that they're speaking to, and feeling a sense of responsibility towards them. Just a quick word on UGC and online journalism. As we've heard before from Tanya, UGC and online participation has often been celebrated uncritically as an opportunity for democratic participation, in particular in the early years of UGC. While some studies have noticed the problematic formations of online publics, for example, homogeneous communities or tribes, they do not examine the deeper levels of power relations that restrict or enable access to participation, as McFarlane and Bonham argue. Van der Burg shows that this goes along with a re-evaluation by many political commentators of PSB, where most propositions suggest that PSB can be limited or becomes completely obsolete because we have this online world in which we can all democratically talk to each other. But as I said, this is not as easy as that. However, there is an increased recognition by scholars and actually also institutions that there are problems and risks with UGC. Thurman and Harrison, for example, point to editorial decisions by most UK news institutions to keep control of content to ensure quality, universality and impartiality. And the interesting thing is they find that also for news organisations that have no public service remit. As a result, UGC is not cheap. It's labour intensive and hence expensive because it needs monitoring. By 2006 and 2007, most content was still pre-monitored, but there's been a gradual shift towards reactionary monitoring. So the comments go up, they go through a filtering system, a software system, and then they go up and then are read by monitors or by editors, and they decide later if this is appropriate or not. But actually, in the BBC case, they're also read for kind of pop-up stories or pop-up or vox pops that can be used for other content. So Harrison points how UGC editors have become more important in the BBC Media Hub. They take part in editorial meetings and are part of the decision-making process of what stories to run and how to run it. For example, which ones to enable with comment. And indeed, one of the UGC editors that I spoke to discussed how the decisions were really very deliberate, where the people would come together in the editorial meeting in the morning, and the section team and the UGC team would discuss which stories were best for Commons, because they can't enable all stories for Commons. They're looking for particular ones. Editors at the BBC are responsible for more than just displaying the displayed comments that I've showed you there. They are actually also soliciting participation for stories. So you might find at the bottom of a story a comment box saying, has this story affected you? We would like to hear from you. So they get really lots and lots of comments. This story, for example, I hope it's still live. Should be, yeah. Has 1,290 comments, and they have to go through all of them. And this is just one story of the day, right? And they're a team of 20. And they pick, editors picks, and then you can read all the comments as well. Normally you have the editors picks, and basically they're picked on the basis of, are they well written, do they offer something new, are they representative of a particular opinion, etc. And you can also read all comments, but only if you realise that you can click this. It took me ages to realise that. So if someone is even less internet literate than me, then that's not good. You can have them highest rated or lowest rated, or you can just read them when they were posted. I will never read 1,290 comments, and I usually just leave it up. And editors' picks is easiest to read, so it's most likely that you're going to read the editors' picks, really. So in-house, they trail through the comments to suggest some editor picks, which are then checked by senior staff, and these editor picks are chosen in line with the remit and editorial considerations. The editorial considerations include elements such as language use and who speaks. For example, a story about teaching would benefit from an input of a teacher or a parent. The relevance of the opinion, the representatives of the larger group, the representatives of a particular side, or it adds something to the debate. And the notion of quality and impartiality guides the decision making in terms of editorial choice, but also the remit, namely inform, educate, and entertain, and impartiality. And the UGC assistant editor Natalie Miller defines this as the impartiality bit as we don't take sides. So the editor picks need to reflect balance of opinion, both in terms of different views, but also proportionality. But the aim is also to give a sense of the breadth of opinion and a sense of giving further insights via the editor picks, according to Miller. But when I looked at one story, and this is an NHS story, it's basically about an MP committee, or a committee of MPs, pointing to the lack of management of consultants in the NHS as a key problem of the NHS. So the consultants go off and do too much private work, basically, that's what it said. And one of the things that I noticed in the editor's picks is that it was largely from people who identified themselves as either being consultants or working in the NHS or private healthcare providers. I hope you can read this. So the top one is from someone who worked as a receptionist for a private healthcare provider, and then we have two consultants in the bottom two speaking. So this is connected to the idea of relevance. There's a clear lack of more political comments. Several commentators, and in particular the highest rated one actually, pointed to a potential smear campaign by Jeremy Hunt, the Secretary of State of Health, to discredit the NHS. Others, namely the lowest rated ones, point to the NHS as a whole as a waste of money and suggest that it should be abolished. Neither of these are included in the editor's picks. Of course, both of them are speculative too, so there is a sense that, you know, they don't really provide information, they don't offer any insight in the debate. However, there's clearly evidence of the different opinions in these views as well. So there's some who are very very negative towards consultants, and some of them are very positive of consultants, and some of them are generally very positive about the NHS. But basically, one of the things that really struck me is that the more emotive or the more political points of views that are represented in the general comments are completely excluded from the editor's pick. So just to conclude, the first thing that really struck me is that the BBC works with a really complex conceptualization of impartiality, which relies on the constant negotiation and evaluation. Impartiality is not a set rule, even though the quip "we don't take sides" sounds a bit like one. But from the top, the BBC trusts, to the very bottom, the production staff. Impartiality is understood as a process of negotiation which largely avoids clearly marked political opinion in favour of further information, eyewitness or testimonials. So the notion of relevance of comment that is picked. Impartiality is then strongly linked to the main public service remit of providing information. Within the news team for the website, the focus is very, very clearly on information. Education and entertainment also play a role, but really the team works with a clear journalistic ethics that is further strengthened by the BBC remit. Within this environment, the public emerges primarily as the user of the service, those who pay for the BBC as a public service. There's a sense of responsibility that permeates even, the work of the journalists and editors to provide quality and relevance. At the same time, there's a sense that a variety of public opinion needs to be represented, though as indicated, obviously they steer away from too political comments. And I think that has a lot to do with the BBC's place at the moment in terms of having a cut of 60% of its licence fee, having to provide more services, having to provide services that were paid for by other people before, now by their own licence fee, etc. And the fact that they're still subsidising Sky. Where am I? Of course, this suggests that the BBC continues to operate with a more traditional understanding of public service. They provide a service for the public. It is through their editorial knowledge and expertise that information is shaped for the public to inform an opinion. Of course, this remains paternalistic and structured around the same power relations that have been critiqued before. However, there are attempts to counter these, for example, by allowing actually UTC and incorporating it. More could be done in terms of power structures within and without the BBC, so more could be done to enable disenfranchised members of the public to engage with UTC, to gain their point of view in another way. More could be done to question experts, and also the middle class emphasis on good written English should really be abolished. The return to paternalistic view, however, indicates a recognition that the public are not those that comment, but are a bigger constituency who will benefit from the further insights that some of their members offer via their comments. Thank you.
Can I just ask
which is just to say, so you're all talking about use of social media, fan activity, message boards, all of which, of course, valuing certain kinds of communication over others. And I wondered about, and in Elka and Tanya's case, set against, the message boards and the social media set against something we're calling public service broadcasting principles. And it just strikes me that in looking in these spaces for something about public service broadcasting, there's this real danger of these slippages, slippages between user, consumer, citizen. And that seems to be tied to something about public service principles. So we're wanting to claim something about citizenship here. And the other one, which is engagement, participation, and democracy. And I just wanted to ask all of you really what the dangers are in looking at in these places which are producing very particular kinds of engagement, and even maybe the term engagement is wrong here, and claiming it, looking there for something that we want to think about in relation to public service broadcasting, or even in your case principles of kind of engagement or participation. So what are the dangers, but then also what are the opportunities? Why are we doing this?
It's a good point, because I suppose there is an assumption there that why would would you look for in certain places for the goals that you were just talking about? I think because, well, from my perspective, the kind of processes that I were talking about are embedded in certain platforms, but they actually transcend those platforms and become discourses. They become ways of operating that then somebody needs to challenge, and that's or somebody should be at least questioning, not even challenging, or highlighting them as practices that are not natural, that they are, they're not just common sense. They're technologically shaped. I mean, I'm not going down a technological determinism route here, but when you uptake a certain platform or a certain practice, it provides you with certain opportunities and certain limitations, and it's not just kind of well, this is how it is. So to me, and the other thing is because, I mean, talking about public service broadcasting and social media, for example, then public service broadcasters do operate with social media. They do engage with it. So that's, they cross over, therefore their principles should cross over as well. Especially as we're now talking about public service media and not just public service broadcasting, which to me we should be. So.
And well, why should we start looking for democratic values in television, or in radio, or in women's magazines, or in anything? And it seems like it's a dream and a hope for using media for a more democratic society. And what I always kind of get surprised and at the same time very curious about is why are we not talking about using democratic theory of participatory democracy? Like Christian Fuchs, who's a really critical theorist on Henry Jenkins and participation, who says that, well, there's a whole body of research. Why are we not using it? Maybe because we are media and communication scholars. Maybe because we don't know a lot about software studies. Maybe it's because, well, we have always been implicit in our way. We have taken public service values as given. I've amused myself with kind of looking how have we been talking about public service values so far. It has been with government bodies, or the actual public service broadcasters themselves, or the people inside public service broadcasting saying this is democracy. So maybe my answer is that, well, I want to have some say in what kind of participatory aspects you could find in this, and also have the possibility to say, no, it's not here, move on.
The reason why I started looking at the message boards or the comments on the news website is because I think I've read too many articles on The Guardian in particular that kind of said this is the key space for people to engage as citizens. So for me, in a way, that I was just curious how does the BBC actually operate with that, and how does it actually function, etc. So for me, there was an opportunity to investigate how the BBC examines or understands the public in relation to citizenship, only to find that wasn't the key space to do it. So, and I think that's really, really good that I did that, because I lived in a world of assumptions shaped by other media discourse, basically, media discussing media. And sometimes you have to go back to basics in order to find that, so that I think that's a real opportunity. The danger is that we do celebrate it, that we do think this is evidence of public engagement, and to some extent this paper does that as well. Yeah, it talks about, in a way, evidence of the take-up of the BBC of the UGC as an indication that they're trying to counter the paternalistic element of it, but actually they only counter an element of the paternalistic thing, because they end up with the same people again, who are the same people they are. So in a way, there's a constant. The BBC is basically for middle-class people by middle-class people, and they're engaging with middle-class people, and it's middle-class people that are engaging with them. So it's a constant loop of the same people talking to each other, the echo chambers.
Yeah, exactly.
And even though it tries, but at least the BBC tries, I think. So, and what I find really interesting is that it doesn't see those people that are engaging with the BBC as representative of the whole public.
Mm.
So that was for me something quite positive. Yeah.
Any questions from someone other than me?
I have a question for to pick up on what you're saying in a way. And I'm interested about the way you kind of positioned it as middle class people, BBC for middle class people, for middle class audiences. Could you say a little bit about who the UGC moderators or editors, or what their job title, whatever it is, you know, who are those people? Are they people at the start of their careers? Are they middle class people as you define them? And just in terms of thinking that through in relation to not just your class issue, but also this thing of how they interpreted editorial balance. So, you know, thinking about their, you know, where they were in their career and whether they maybe were predisposed to particular assumptions.
That was one of the things that was one of my first questions. Are these people actually journalists? How are they trained? And all of them had university degrees, and all of them had gone through significant training programs in different BBC departments in relation to journalism. So most the people that I spoke to were in their 30s so far, but I haven't spoken to many people yet after this. So they're not at the beginning of their career, but they're not necessarily at the end of it either. So they're kind of in the middle.
Yeah.
And can you just remind me of the balance thing again?
Well, I mean, I guess there are two things. Is that then that they're about their identity in terms of, you know, whether you would say they were middle class people, or whether you didn't think to kind of ascertain that, but also whether that their position in their career or their position within the food chain within the BBC might have led them to particular predispositions about, you know, I was really struck by the way in which you said the political was absent from editors' picks. You know, is that because these people couldn't take risks? Was the point in their career that they were, or the position in the hierarchy that they were, they didn't want to upset the, you know, others?
No, I think there's a real attempt by the BBC to steer clear from it generally. That comes out of the inside the BBC stuff as well. It's always about information. They don't want to provide political comment. They want information. I think that has a lot to do with the situation the BBC finds itself in at the moment. But it is a discourse within the BBC as a whole, which is about we don't actually want to do that. We want to avoid it at all costs. Because we want to provide the information on which you, as a public, can then build your opinion from.
We've got time for one more quick question.
Okay. That campaign you were showing us to get the app started, very cynically, do you think that was just a very clever marketing campaign?
It was a very clever marketing campaign. It is not authentic in any way. It's just a pile of bogus in the name of public service broadcasting. It's when I looked into the different companies that were involved in this, they state that, well, it was not for real. We launched the app the same day as we launched the campaign. It was just a marketing thing. And it wasn't real. So now for today, example, if you go and log on to the website, it's a commercial for Japanese water, emphasizing this play with authenticity. And at the same time, we had a big Twitter debate about what is real and not, and if you were supposed to, in this big political Tivoli, it's like a big, it's like a rock event in Almedalen in Sweden, where all the politicians gather on an island and talk about politics and drink wine. And there was a fake news on this Almedalen that was after this, and I was at a conference talking about post-digital media economy, and the people that made this campaign were there, and we discussed if it was in line with the marketing organization in Sweden, their claim for relevance and truth and accuracy. But they were really proud because it's funny.
I thought it was brilliant. It's perfect because it engages on such a simple and easy level,
Yeah.
very well structured, and I think that people would engage with just those very basic.
And public service broadcasting becomes this exciting, experimenting, small, aligned but still against Apple.
Okay, I think we should call it a day there and thank our speakers. And